Welcome to Gotta Run. This is Will Sanchez. My honored guest today is Tony Ruiz. Tony has been for the past 20 years the head coach of roads for the Central Park Track Club. I first saw Tony years and years ago at the Nike Town Running Club when he showed up to be a pacer for us. It was a thrill to see Tony up there, and he was wonderful, and he showed up for a few more weeks. I've always seen Tony out of the corner of my eye because every time I see a video like Team for Kids, there would be Tony next to Sid Howard, guiding the future generation of runners. I'm honored to have Tony as a guest.
Thank you, Will. Thank you for having me. And I'm actually honored to be a guest on your show, as I'm a big fan. You've interviewed quite a few of my actual mentors and people that I admire quite a bit. As you mentioned, Sid Howard, Anthem LeBourne, and Herbie Medina have been on your show.
Oh, yes.
So these are all a lot of my peers, and so I've seen your interviews.
What a great group. But well, before we go into all those great stars, oh my gosh, I feel such joy in having met all these people and now meeting you because they all speak so highly of Tony.
Thank you.
Let's introduce you to our audience. Tell us where you were born and something about your growing up years.
I am born here in Manhattan, New York, in Spanish Harlem. I grew up in the Lower East Side. I spent actually time in the Lower East Side as well as Brooklyn. It was one of those things where it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And, you know, I come from immigrant parents, so the early years I'd spend time with a family in Manhattan, and then I'd come to Brooklyn and be with my parents and my family on the weekends. And so I spent a little time on both. And of course, I visited Puerto Rico all the time, you know, every summer.
That's your heritage, Puerto Rican?
Yes, I am Puerto Rican, and yeah, so I have a special connection to my island. And I actually studied there in 6th grade, and then in my first year in college. So, you know, I'm fluent in Spanish. I read and write it very well. So people are always surprised of that.
Because you don't have an accent.
I don't have an accent, and I'm New York Rican, and often like New York Ricans know English and speak very little bit of Spanish. And so it's rare when they actually can write it and read it fluently.
That's right, that's true. That is, you are a rarity in many ways. We're learning here.
As a kid, when I was in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, I would often race from the block that leads to my school. And I remember this one kid would always beat me. And I was probably in 2nd grade, and I was so determined. I was like, I was going to beat him at some point. And I remember seeing Tommy Smith and John Carlos, the Olympics of 1968, when they took the Olympic stance.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that I wanted to be just like those guys. And they inspired me, and I finally beat Harold, you know, and I became the fastest kid in the school, basically in the 3rd grade.
That's amazing. You remember that competitiveness. Says, I want to do better, and I think I could take that guy. And you did.
Yes, and I did.
3rd grade.
3rd grade. It was already there, you know, I knew.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at George Westinghouse High School, downtown Brooklyn.
Westinghouse, really?
Yes.
Is that a vocational school?
It's a vocational and technical at that time. I think it has changed recently.
Okay.
In addition to things like electrical engineering, we had electronics, we had dental shop, we had optometry, woodworking, you know, things like that.
Oh, interesting. What was your specialty?
Actually, dental shop.
Okay.
I didn't really actually enjoy it that much, but you had to pick a shop. In retrospect, I should have probably chose something like electronics, you know.
Okay.
But got into dental shop. I had a couple of friends there. You want to go with your friends, so I chose dental shop for my 2 years. You know.
All right. Sounds like your running was going very well during those days.
Yes, it was. I started running in the 8th grade competitively. And from the time I was in junior high school, when I won my first city title, it was at Randall's Island, and I was undefeated in junior high school. So this was prior to getting to Westinghouse. And now all of a sudden I'm in Randall's Island, city champs, and guys have spikes on, and I have my pro Keds, and my coach looks at me and he sees I'm nervous, and he said, you know, Tony, all you have to do is stay behind them and then just kick. No one can out-kick you. And I remember thinking that, you know, in my head. And as the race went off, I just followed his instructions. The first lap was like 64.5 or something. And then the second lap was like 65 flat or whatever it was, 64.6. It was a 209.1, and I won my first city title. It was actually 880 yards.
This was before meters.
So it was before meters.
It's been a tremendous high to be coming
yeah.
first.
You never forget those kind of races. I mean, those are the ones that, you just, till the day I die, I'll never forget that 209.1.
Obviously, you got something, a bling or a certificate?
Well, yeah, medal.
Medal?
Medal.
You probably still have it?
Absolutely. It's one of the cherished ones. That one I won't give away.
Okay.
I gave away a lot of them.
After Westinghouse, you didn't go into the dental industry. Where did you move after high school? Did you go on, I think you went to the University of Bayamón?
Yeah. University of Puerto Rico in Bayamón. Basically, they recruited me at Penn Relays, where Westinghouse High School was second in the distance medley. Okay. That was one of my best races. I ran a 304.2 for 1,200 something
1,200 meters. Oh,
yards.
This was like 4 different races. 400, 800, 1,200, 1,600.
That's correct. In my senior year, it was still actually in yards.
Oh,
so
okay.
whatever 1,200 meters is converted into yards.
Now, does it go off like 400, 800, or is there a mixture?
Well, the way they did it in my year, it was the 800 to the 400 to the 1,200 to the mile.
Oh, so you were the third guy.
Yes.
And I think if I remember the story, you handed it off in first place.
I did. As I reflect on that, it might have been a mistake because my anchor leg was the great Billy Pearson, who was phenomenal. And Billy was not a good runner from the lead. He liked to chase people down. I did hand it off in first, and one of the top times ever recorded there at the time. There was a guy right behind him, and the guy sped up in front of him and took him early in the race, and we wound up second.
I've had great runners here, like the great Roger Robinson, and he says, strategy, strategy, strategy. The smartest runner will win.
Oh, absolutely. Relays they have a different dynamic. Relays take on a different tone.
Yeah.
So what happens is, if you have a guy like Billy Pearson, he always rose to the challenge, and I think that, had he been behind the guy, even if it was just one step, I think that he would have reacted differently to that first 60-second quarter,
but still, and you didn't talk about baton,
Yes. Baton passing is a big part of that.
So the University of Puerto Rico saw that.
Yeah.
Was there an Olympic possibility going to Puerto Rico?
Yes. From the time I was probably 14, 15 years old, right from my freshman, sophomore year in high school, I had started to win like some national titles, and so people just sort of like put the label on me, like future Olympian. And so in my head, that was always the goal. And it sort of made perfect sense to me. Won the national junior title at 800 meters.
Now we're into the meters, so you crossed over.
Yes, yes. Oddly enough, right, at the University of Puerto Rico in 1980, they started doing meters.
Yeah, feet above ground, the meters and the yards.
Yes, I ran actually, most of my best races were on track, were actually before I was 19 years old. Because,
oh my gosh. And now you probably got better shoes than brokeheads.
Yes, by then I was wearing spikes, yes.
1980, that was the year the United States decided not to go to do the Olympics because of the Russians.
Yes.
Always the Russians.
They're always involved. Yes.
It supposedly affected our elections, who knows?
Yes.
But they definitely affected your career in 1980.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge turning point for me because prior to that, even if you inspect my career and look at it, you can clearly see that I was heading, in my mind, I was heading towards greatness.
Obviously, we're disappointed for not going to the Olympics. You trained all your life for it. So what did you do?
I came back to New York. I was a disgruntled 18, 19-year-old kid. I quit running for a year. I didn't want to run anymore. Pretty much I was depressed. I was mad. I was angry, all those words. And my mother said, well, if you're not going to run and go to school, you got to go to work. Right after Puerto Rico, I worked at the Rockefeller family office here in Rockefeller Center. It's a nice place. My parents have worked for the Rockefeller family. Well, they're retired now, but they worked for them probably 30, 35 years, I want to say.
Oh, excellent.
That's what I did for the next year until I started to get that itch again. I took off a year. I started to run again, and I jumped into the marathon in 1981 just because, I had been training for about 3 or 4 months after a year off. This woman in my office, David Rockefeller's secretary, her name is Carol K. Taylor, and she saw me in the race at about 24 miles, and she said, "Tony, did you run the whole race?" Because I didn't have a number. I was a bandit. Back in those days, you could do that kind of thing. You can't do that today. You can't get to the start line. Right.
Now, was that the first 5-borough one? Or?
The first 5-borough, which was in 1976, I did that one also. I was 15 years old.
You just woke up and decided to do it?
Just woke up that morning, 76, with my friend Louis. And Louis and I, he was a high school teammate of mine. Really, the plan was to run 15 miles because we had like Brooklyn champs the next week. And of course, 20 miles into it, we're running along the East River, which a lot of people don't know. That's how you know. If somebody said they ran a 1976 marathon, I always ask them 2 things. How was it on First Avenue? Because there was no First Avenue.
I mean, no running on First Avenue?
No.
Oh, interesting. So you went, after the bridge, you went out to the East River?
Yeah.
To the Esplanade, whatever they called it at that time?
Yes. There was like some type of like a heliport ramp. And it took you,
okay.
It took you from,
But wait a minute, did they have steps? Because I remember they always had these steps they had to go up.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. We ran along the East River, and then to get back onto First Avenue, right, to get back from the East River, I recall going up steps. Now, I used to dream with running all the time. So for years and years, I used to say, did I really run up steps, or was that a dream? Because I used to dream with running every night. I mean, as a kid. So I never would tell anyone this story until I approached George Hirsch at our team benefit, the Central Park Track Club team benefit. And I asked George, I said, "George, do you remember running upstairs in 1976? And he looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, you remember that too, right?" And I said, "Yeah, we ran upstairs."
I think they're still there.
The stair, yeah, because I think it's on maybe 108th or 10th. There's some stairs there.
Yeah, there's some stairs.
And,
that's fascinating. You mentioned you had a race the following week. There's no way you're going to recover in time to do well.
Well, actually, we had a race 2 days later, a dual meet. We didn't want the coach to know that we ran the 26 miles. So 2 days later, we ran the dual meet. It was a very weak school, so we took it very easy. We won the dual meet, but the big race was the Saturday. And then the following Saturday, I ran like 12 seconds slower than I had run the previous week, which was 13:30.
And your coach was probably going, "I guess Tony wasn't your day."
Well, he figured it out. He did. He actually, what happened, this is a great story. The coach from our rivals team, which was Brooklyn Tech, it's a guy by the name of Ed Zarowin. He's one of the icons, won 3 distance medley championships at Penn with Tech. And he saw us after the race, right after we were laid out at 26 point whatever miles of
at the Tavern Green, I guess.
Yeah, right around Tavern on the Green. We're there, and he's looking at us, and he looks down at us, and he smiles. He's got this big grin, and he's just like, "I'll see you guys next week at Brooklyn Champs." And I never forget that, because it was almost like he said, like, "You guys just gave me the Brooklyn and City Championships," because we were big rivals, you know.
Geez,
basically...
so if he was a betting man, he probably made a lot of money. I don't know if they were betting in those days.
Right.
So you did the inaugural 5-borough marathon.
Right.
And then in 81, after you had the disappointment with the Olympics and not going, this secretary said, Central Park Track Club is the way to go?
Yes. And I said, well, I'm really not competing these days. I just did it for fun, and Central Park are my rivals. You know, I ran for East Coast Track Club, and we were big rivals with Central Park. Yeah. Prior to that, it was called United AA.
Oh.
Then we converted to East Coast Track Club.
Okay.
Said I can't go over to the rivals. You know, they're the enemy.
But what happened that changed your mind?
Well, she mentioned that there was this coach named George Wisniewski who was coming over from Washington High School, which is in Uptown Manhattan. And he's going to be the new coach of Central Park. Because I told her also, I says, the Central Park guys were all like ultra marathoners, and they had the best ultra marathoners in the world at that time. And I said, I'm a track runner. I'm not going to fit in with that those kind of guys, you know? And she said, no, but the coach is coming in and he's bringing in like a bunch of track guys, a bunch of Dominicans from Washington High School.
She's a secretary. She knows more about it than
Yeah.
a typical person.
Yes, because she was a masseuse.
Oh.
So she knew
now it
all
makes
the
sense.
goings on.
So you got him on the table and you got to
And
talk.
she's talking, right.
Okay, now we know where she was getting her good information.
Yeah, good info. November of 1981 was my first workout for the team.
Mm-hmm. Central Park Track Club.
Yes.
Obviously, you liked it.
Yes.
Because
Can you tell?
Left.
You know,
You
like
haven't left. So I would imagine this coach took you under the wings and made you an assistant coach at some point?
Yes, yes. He started talking to me about coaching. And so I coached a young girls team in my community, like in 1987. That was really my first coaching. Actually, my first coaching job was at Iona College. I loved it. And he said, you know, you're going to be a perfect fit. And he made me his assistant in 1989.
He was your mentor. He was the one that taught you the coaching game.
All the tricks.
Oh, well, you know, this is old school because nowadays they put you on machines. In those days, you have to know your runners. You have to see how they perform.
Oh, yes. He was amazing in that he could look at runners, and this is what I studied from him more than anything was because philosophically you learn all that stuff when you're working out, so you pick up on all those things. But we would sit down in Newport, on the rocks in Newport, by some stream. He had this pipe, and he just would smoke the pipe, and he would just start telling stories about different runners and how different gaits, or how a guy had too long of a stride, or he was too bouncy to be a good marathoner. And I would question everything he said, because he was telling me, you know, he says, listen, you got too much torque, and you're going to get hurt if you run marathons. And I would, oh man, I fought him, you know, because I really wanted to run like a marathon.
Well, you've done it twice as a bandit, so you want to do it legitimately.
Right, I wanted to do it.
But anyway, he said you didn't have the right body type for a marathon?
Yeah.
Because your body was
too much
whatever.
torque, power. And I was already having some knee issues on the roads. So he just told me, he says, listen, if you want to stay healthy and run till you're 55, which I am now, and hopefully beyond. I mean, he was incredible at predicting these kind of things. And he says, you know, you're a lifer, Tony. If you run track and cross country, you'll be competitive probably till your dying day. And
excellent. So he was really more like a Yoda of coaches.
Yes, yes,
Wise,
he was absolutely
beyond his years.
Yeah, we used to call him the Whiz.
The Wiz. I like the image of him with the pipe.
Yeah, yes. It was quite an image. Yeah.
When did you officially become the head coach of Rhodes?
97.
He retired or he moved on?
Yeah, he just basically moved on, and he essentially told the team, he says, if you want to be in good hands, hire Tony to be your coach.
Oh, okay. Well, obviously that was a unanimous and quick decision.
It was, although I was resistant at first, because you know, at the time, I was 36 years old, and you know, even though I had passed my prime, I was still pretty competitive. That I would have to give up a lot in terms of my own competitive juices and being able to channel that towards my athletes, you know?
That's interesting. So you had to make that choice.
Actually, he wanted Sid and I to do it, and Sid wouldn't do it. Sid started his career late, so he was really, his main focus was on becoming world champion.
Oh, he did in the 60s, and
that's right.
And he held records in the 70s.
Right.
Relays with the great Dr. Dan Hamner. The two of them were.
Of course. He wouldn't do it. It was too much for him because this was the best running he had done in his life.
And he was older too. I mean, like you said, he's already in the 70s now, you know.
Sure.
So he was 15 years older
20-something years older than me.
Yeah.
20, about at least 23 years older, about 78.
Does that make him too old?
Yeah. He's older than me, but he's more
still
mature.
Fast, very seasoned.
Yeah, very seasoned veteran. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So what a great honor because
yeah.
You read about it all the time. You guys send athletes to the Olympic trials.
Yes.
Wow, for the Central Park Track Club.
Yes.
So what is your philosophy in getting people to do their best?
Philosophically, I think that one of the key things for most of my runners, and they know that I impress this upon them, is to have a real good balance in your training. So basically, you know, like this whole idea of like every final expression race being a marathon, I think is way overrated. So if I had to pin it down to one thing, philosophically, I would say just have balance. Like have every other year focus on indoors. Try to run cross country every season. Great for conditioning. You can race a lot, and then limit sort of the pounding on the legs of the roads. What a lot of people don't recognize or fail to recognize is that it's not so much that I don't like the marathon. I love it. It's just that living in New York, there aren't really a lot of places to go running. And if you have a family and this kind of thing, we often get up in the morning, go to run to work. It's the concrete jungle in New York.
Yeah,
it's not
on the foot.
It's hard on the knees, hard on the back.
Especially if you're carrying a backpack.
You carry a backpack, right? So all these things are factors in why I think it's extremely important for runners to take that perspective, have that balance.
Now, what about cross training? Do you encourage cycling, swimming, Pilates?
What I will say is that there's a time and place for everything. So in other words, if you're injured, sure, you should swim. If you're cycling once a week, no problem. But if you want to become a better runner, you have to run.
Okay.
So cross training, sure. I mean, a lot of people now strength train and do all these other little things, and you want to do it. And in particular, the periodization of this type of training is also important, because like say if you're into strength training, weights, you have to know what you're doing. You have to have the proper coaching for that and do it at the right time of the season.
I have a friend, he's been trying to do his best to run the New York City Marathon. He sometimes qualifies for Boston, but he hasn't cracked New York City. His problem, like most people, he goes out too fast.
Yes.
What is your advice as a coach, puts that little bit of information of running the New York City Marathon? Is there a strategy that you would recommend?
The primary thing that I tell my athletes is my 10-10-10 theory on running the marathon, which is breaking it up into 10 miles, and 10K.
That adds up to 26.2.
That's right. And I think that if you break that down into those that 10-10-10, with the first 10 being a little slower than race pace or goal pace, 3 to 5 seconds slower, the middle portion being perhaps a little faster than goal pace, and then at the end, goal pace. So the whole idea behind that type of approach is that if you can execute that properly, particularly in New York where it's so tough the last 10K, the whole idea to that, I remember talking with George about this, the whole concept behind it is that in New York in particular, it's really important to conserve early in the race.
Yep.
If you're giving up a few seconds early in the race, you probably have to make up 30 to 50 seconds in the middle 10 and then the last 10K. It's not really a lot in a marathon. Yeah. You can easily make that up. But the energy that you conserve in those early miles, since those are the easy miles, plays a huge role in how you are able to race and execute in the final 10K, which we know is the whole marathon.
So it sounds like if you do that, you're doing it at a split because you're doing your better time in the second 10 miles.
Second 10 miles. Yeah, the funny thing is, often people, even before they try it, they go, it's impossible, you can't do it. And then what happens is that over the years, I've had, like one of my first people to really put that into effect was Margaret Angel, who was our club record holder for many years. She came at 29th place at USA Marathon Trials in 2004. And so for the first 4 or 5 races that she did, she would always do that. And every race she would come up and say, yeah, I had more in the tank. I could have finished stronger. I should have went out harder. And I said, no, well, the reason you had more in the tank is because you had,
you did the first 10 properly.
That's right. And I said, so what that does, it allows a runner to really compete, feel good after the marathon, and not have that sinking feeling of blowing up. Because the worst thing with any runner psychologically is when they go out and they train so hard, and then like the last 10 miles of the race.
Yeah, they want to quit, or they got to fight the mental
part.
That's interesting.
And then afterwards as well, bouncing back from that is tough.
So the 10-10-10 doesn't necessarily just for New York. That could be for any marathon, And then after you get more and more experience, you can modify it.
Very good. You pick up quick. You pick up quick. That's very important because the more you do that and the more confidence you gain along with the experience, then the more you can play around with it, particularly if you're on a course maybe like Chicago that's flat.
Yeah.
You know, you can take more chances. Like Margaret, using her as an example, because she was sort of the first one that I really introduced into this, and people followed behind her.
Okay.
People like Audrey Kingsley. People would see their splits and go like, oh, you can actually negative split, even in New York.
Yeah.
You see?
It's rare.
And it's hard to do, but once you get a few people on board and they kind of buy into it, then it's easy to sell.
Yeah, nothing sells like success.
Yes.
You've been very successful throughout your whole life, so I have to tip my hat to you.
Thank you.
To wrap up, what are your challenges professionally? What do you want to see Central Park Track Club? What do you want to take them?
More Olympians, you know. We've had quite a run. I mean, recently, you know, with the Olympic Games, a lot of people on the track, you know. I've had world champions, more Masters world champions. I mean, you know, you just get to the point where your career is sort of starts becoming defined by the raw numbers that you put together.
Yeah. So you're the dad now, you know, you got all these kids.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. If I had one goal, I would say that it would be to have somebody that, a marathon runner that would be ranked in the top in the world. You know, that's always, I mean, it's a really, really hard thing to do, but, you know, you have to shoot
10,
for the
yeah.
top.
Yeah,
you know, it would be nice
tough.
to one day have somebody that was on that level.
Yeah,
you know?
New York got a few great marathoners. Yeah, and the coaching, everybody's a coach, it seems. So, so it's like, all right, you know. But it's great, you know, that Central Park Track Club has the consistency and has a record that you can look at and be proud of. And then personally, I mean, obviously you still stay in great shape. You know, get a master's medal at some point.
Funny you should say that, because on a personal level, there are a couple of things that I still would like to accomplish, but the one that I think is most feasible for me is to get a world championship medal. I've been in the top 10 4 times at Masters, you know, world track, 800 and 1500 meters, and came 4th in Puerto Rico, just missing out. I've been 5th, 8th. Top 3 is medal, so that's sort of like my little secret goal.
This is against the world, not just locally.
Yeah, it's against the world. Yeah, those competitions are phenomenal. I mean, you know, you just get the best of the best, and just making the final is a nice thing. But I mean, it would be nice to have one of those medals. You know, since I've had most of the other ones. You know, Melrose, Penn Relays.
Well, got to find you a good coach.
Yes,
the coach's coach.
Yeah. It's hard. Like, I often look at Devin Martin's workout, who's our track coach, you know.
Yeah.
Her stuff is phenomenal, but the only thing is that she does workouts when I'm doing workouts. So it's really hard for me to join in with that group, you know. But, it gets harder, you know. It gets harder to...
You must know Anselm LeBourne.
Of course. Me and Anselm go back to high school.
Train with him.
High school. We're big rivals.
He's a phenomenal.
We have a long, long history. The first time that Anselm beat me in a road race, I remember that I used to destroy him in distances. He'll tell you this.
Oh, yeah, he's an 800
He
guy.
was an 800 guy from high school. But then all of a sudden, when we were in like our late 20s, we were running this race in Brooklyn, and I was pretty dominant back in those days, you know? And I certainly wasn't expecting him. And all of a sudden, like, we're running this 5K, and Anselm's right on me, and the next thing you know, he surprises me and he beats me at the line. And he ran like a 15:06, I ran 15:07, and I'm looking at him like, when did you become a 5K runner, you know?
Yeah, he's amazing. He's probably slowing down the slowest of all runners that I know. He's
amazing.
And his workouts are just amazing.
Very, very committed. That's the hardest thing of being a coach, you know, that you lose a lot of the passion and the commitment, because a lot of my energy goes towards my athletes. I've accomplished kind of pretty much all of my goals.
That Masters thing, yeah.
Yeah, that one Masters thing I'd like to do, but I really, you know, at 55, your priorities shift, you know,
of course.
And you really think like, you know, I only have but so much energy. Where am I going to distribute it to, and where can I be the most helpful?
That's right.
It's in my coaching and in my athletes. So then all of a sudden, when the world's coming around and I get this, you know, I always stay in shape,
Yeah.
but Anselm stays committed all year round.
Yeah,
He really is.
He's a Facebook pal, and every week he's showing off his his numbers. He's always surprised by his own numbers.
Yeah.
Which are phenomenal.
Yeah,
So listen,
incredible.
I wish that good thing continue to happen for you, and thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. Well, appreciate you having me here. It's been an honor.